Greetings, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. And I hope you are doing well wherever you are and whatever time of day it is. It's a good day for you, so welcome. My name is Andrea Brockmeyer. I'll be your moderator today for our PMI Certification Chat. I'm the Director of Project Management for Watermark, and I have been around the certification scene for many, many years. With PMP, PMI-ACP, PMI-PBA, I've developed curriculum in certification courses. I deliver that curriculum for those certification courses, and am involved in the various resources and tools that we have developed for helping folks pass those certification exams. So it's just really great to be with you here today. Our next certification chat, just so you know, is coming up next month, Friday, June 8th. And we've got a couple of certification classes on the horizon as well. So we've got a PMI-PBA class starting next week on Monday. That's a virtual online class. And then our next PMP certification class is starting in August 8th, and that will also be an online class. So it would be terrific to see you in either or both of those, or in any of our others. You can check our schedule online for updates on when we're offering those and any of our classes. You will get a copy of the slides today after the end of our session. And so be looking for that. In addition, you will get some discounts for showing up today and participating in our chat. So that will be included in the follow-up that you get after our chat today too. So I've got some things that I want to talk about today in our time, but if this is really intended to be an opportunity for you to ask questions and for me to either answer them or make a note and get back to you after our session. So if anything comes to mind, if you've got something that you want more information on, please send it in the question window there, and I will address things as they come up. So otherwise, I've just got some things that I have to kind of share with you, and trying to anticipate some of the questions that you might have, and just based on questions that I have received in the past. So don't hesitate to send something in the question window there, and I'll address it as I am able. All right, so here is just a general resources page for you that may include some things that you may find helpful from us. There's some PMI related stuff there as well. So this is just kind of a resource for you there to keep in mind on that. And just here are a couple of things that I'm going to talk about. Actually, I'm not going to say too much about the CAPM pilot that's going on, because that's almost over here in the next couple of weeks. Unless somebody has some questions about it, I can answer them, but they're well into that, so probably not going to do that. But I just want to talk about some of these other things. I know this looks like a really long list, but some of them don't take too long. So just to let you know, I've got some things I anticipate sharing, and like I say, ask away if something comes to mind. So here is an update page from PMI. We've been watching this pretty closely in these last number of months here, the first half of this year. We've been watching this daily, and all the big news is pretty much on here now, so not such a big deal as it has been in the past. But this is just really looking at the dates for some of the changes that have been happening this year. And the only one that's really of huge interest right now is just that June 25th date. So that is the date that the PBA exam is changing. So, but this is it's on the link from that links page that I was showing you a minute ago. So, just in the future, FYI, it's a good page to have a link to. All right. So one of the things that I have been talking about this year, because there has been a lot going on with PMI certifications, and people have been, a lot of concern about what exactly is going to be the nature of the changes, how significant are the changes, is that I just take a couple of minutes to talk about the process for exam updates from PMI. And because I think people don't always really understand what drives changes on PMI exams, and this can help set expectations a little bit in terms of the nature of what's going to be happening. So the first thing to note is that PMI certifications are not book-based exams. That is, they're not intended to be a test on your understanding of the PMBOK or any of their standards, with the exception of the CAPM. So the Certified Associate in Project Management is specifically an exam on the PMBOK. Their other certifications are certifications on your understanding of how to apply good practices in whatever domain or field we're talking about. So they are role-based exams. They're not book-based exams. And so that's the first thing that's important to understand. So the reason that's important is that if we look at, okay, the PMBOK is getting updated, what implications will that have for the exam? It'll have some, but it's not gonna be a huge rewrite of the test. Okay. So how they develop their exams, first of all, what they do is they put together a committee of folks who go out into the field, in the field broadly speaking, and diversity of regions and different types of industries, and they send those folks out there, let's say, for example, project managers, and they say, hey, go out there and see what project managers need to know and be able to do in order to be effective in their role. Go out there and take a look, ask questions, poke around, and see what is it that makes for a good project manager. And they do this about every 4 or 5 years. And what they do as a result of that is they put together what's called a role delineation study. Okay, and so it's a study that identifies what it is people do, let's say, for example, in project management or in business analysis when in the context of projects and programs. And then from that, they put together what's called an exam content outline, or an ECO. And this actually creates the blueprint for that exam. And the ECO identifies tasks that those people in that role do. And so this is a way of identifying, okay, here's what a project manager, for example, needs to do. What they do is they do initiating things and planning things and executing things. And here are the tasks that they need to be able to do in that process group or whatever. And so it's the blueprint for the exam. So when they write test questions, then they go to the current exam content outline, and they have to make sure that the questions in the test map back to those tasks in that ECO. The ECO is a free document. It is available online. So if you go to PMI.org and you click on certifications, you click on whichever certification you're interested in, you'll find in the right margin there the ECO. And and that'll be the current exam content outline. So as a result of this role delineation study that they do every 4 or 5 years, that ECO gets updated every 4 or 5 years. This is where the most significant changes come in a PMI exam. The biggest changes in the actual update, the major update or revision to the exam is inspired by that. Because what you're doing is you're going out and saying there's been some fundamental changes in the role. Okay. What they do after that then is they reconcile the exam questions to make sure that it is utilizing and then that make sure that it is aligned with the current standards, both their standards, meaning PMI standards, and the standards in other sources that make up the body of knowledge. So the body of knowledge, broadly speaking, let's say, for example, the project management body of knowledge, broadly speaking, basically means everything currently right now in the project management library, including the project management body of knowledge and all the other resources that they identify in their resource list for that exam. So the last thing they do is when they are updating exams or when they're writing exams questions, is they make sure that they're using terminology that is consistent with the current standards. So what's happened this year is that we haven't had a change in the role delineation study or the exam content outline. What we have had is an update in the standards, right? We've had an update in the project management body of knowledge, and we have a new standard that we are dealing with, that is the Guide to Business Analysis. So the exam updates this year are really just about updating terminology and making sure that things are consistent with those standards. It's not fundamental rewrites of the exam based on role delineation study and exam content outline updates. So the reason I think that's helpful to understand is because what's going on this year, it's not going to be a wholesale rewrite. So just in terms of setting expectations. It's not to say that there aren't some updates and you need to, make sure that you're current, but I think it's just helpful to understand how that how the exams are created. All right, so here's what's going on, and I've been updating this as I go through this year, just keeping everybody up to date on what's happening. So the PMP exam was updated end of March. We're kind of done with that. So you go out in the ECO, the current version of the ECO is online. We're using the PMBOK 6th Ed and Watermark course materials for our August class. That'll be current. So we're kind of done there. ACP, same thing. We're that exam was updated. And the main resource there is the PMI Agile Practice Guide, which comes bundled with the PMBOK now, and our course materials are current there as well. Now, in terms of the PMBOK, the Agile Practice Guide comes bundled with the PMBOK. You don't need to spend a ton of time with the Agile Practice Guide if you're studying for the PMP. I mean, you need to understand big picture, adaptive, predictive, that kind of thing. But the majority of the Agile or adaptive related questions are going to be for the ACP exam. Now, just a quick comment about the CAPM. That exam, first day for that new exam is going to be May 21st, and effective May 21st, they actually have a new ECO because, as I said, that one is actually based on the PMBOK, so that gets rewritten when the PMBOK gets updated. So those changes kind of go hand in hand. So that is getting a wholesale rewrite effective May 21st. So the one change left here is the PBA. So June 25 is the magic day there. Between now and then, our Watermark study guide, our Watermark course materials, and the BA practice guide, the PMI-BA practice guide, are your key resources. Now, the PMBOK guide is a resource only insofar as the PBA is an exam about business analysis done in the context of projects and programs. So if you really don't know anything, the whole project management thing is a mystery to you. You need the PMBOK as a reference just to get some context around the environment in which you're doing business analysis. It can also be helpful to go back and to see where the role of the BA and the PM work together. So, there are points, for example, in our materials or in our study guide where we say, you might want to go read this section in scope management, for example. But you do not need to have deep knowledge on the PMBOK in order to pass the PBA exam. Okay. Now, effective June 25th, the ECO is going to remain the same. Our Watermark study guide is getting updated, and that'll be updated sometime later in the summer. And then the key resources are going to be the BA practice guide. And really, instead of the PMBOK, we're going to be emphasizing the Guide to Business Analysis. So PMI has authored or published their Guide to Business Analysis, which is kind of like the PMBOK for the BA world. And so that'll be a primary resource there. And our course materials will be updated as well. So if you have our course materials or in our study guide now, and you're planning on taking the test after June 25th, it's not that that stuff is going to be wrong. It's not that you know, it isn't going to help you, but you're going to want to spend some time and commune with that that guide to business analysis. You're going to need to spend some time with that. And there's a considerable amount in there that talks about how business analysis practices and processes and artifacts are different in an adaptive environment as opposed to a predictive. So I think one of the big changes that we're going to see June 25th is going to be some emphasis on agile, adaptive, what business analysis looks like in that environment relative to a predictive or more traditional environment. Okay. All right. So, you know, what's in this PMBOK 6th Ed? There are, for each knowledge area, we don't have any, the knowledge areas have stayed the same. The process groups have stayed the same. So I've just got a couple things I like to highlight just because it's still pretty new. People are like, okay, what's the big deal? What's different? So what they've done is they have put some short sections at the beginning of each knowledge area. And these are things that that they're not real lengthy. It may be even just a couple of paragraphs. But at the beginning of each knowledge area, we've got some trends and emerging practices. What are some of the things that there's, you know, that we're seeing out there as it relates to some of these processes in these knowledge areas? So, for example, in cost management, we talk about a little bit about earned schedule. We don't just have earned value, we have earned schedule now. Working with team members, you know, self-organizing teams. In procurement, you know, you see people working with really, really large, you know, billion-dollar projects, multiple contractors, lots of contracting. A more comprehensive, wider perspective on stakeholders and how do we identify them, and being more inclusive in terms of who's involved in identifying those folks. So those are just some examples. Another section then that is at the beginning of each knowledge area is tailoring considerations. So this really isn't new. I mean, when you're reading the, you know, when you read the PMBOK, nowhere does it say these things get applied lock, stock, and barrel the same on every project, that you have to tailor them. You have to make sure that you're considering the unique aspects of the project in terms of how you apply these things. So what they've done is they've created a little section at the beginning of each knowledge area to give some examples of, you know, what about scope management? What implications might, for example, the type of project that you have or the certainty around your requirements, you know, what implications will that have? That's something you need to think about in tailoring how you do scope management. In terms of risk, how big is the project? How complex is it? What's the relative importance of this project? Those are some things that will impact how you practice risk management on your project. So not really new ideas, they've just kind of tidied things up in terms of having a section there. And then they have a short section on considerations for agile and adaptive environments. So again, you don't need to spend tons of time on the Agile Practice Guide, but just be aware project type is going to have implications for how you practice projects. So, you know, are there benefits, for example, of breaking things down, chunking the work? You know, what about the impact of, you know, transparency, or what considerations do you need to make around transparency? How about collaboration? You know, things that you need to think about in terms of collaborating on some of these processes. So that you will see at the beginning of each section. So a couple things to note about the PMBOK if you haven't seen it already or taken a look at it, or you haven't heard. It's really big. This thing does not get shorter. It's very large. Also, it's icky to read. I mean, it's got these really awful gray pages, and the pages are really, really thin. They're almost like, you know, like hymnal pages or something. And so it's just not, it's not an easy document to actually read. The reason the pages are gray, by the way, is that it's a way of protecting their IP. You can't, if you photocopy the pages, it'll show up as a copyright violation. In e-copies, it's just a way of protecting people from protecting their IP. You can't copy it. So that's why they've done that. It's awful to read. And it's just so dang long, you know, I mean, it's just a lot to digest. So when I started looking at this months ago, you know, and I was like, oh man, you're not going to sit down and kind of read it cover to cover. Not that you ever did that with the PMBOK, but it's just really kind of overwhelming. So, you know, I gave some thought to, you know, what's a good way to digest this? What's a good way to break this thing down so that I can actually consume it? And so something to note is that, you know, there are these different parts of the PMBOK, and not all of this is new, but it's really helpful to take a step back and look at, okay, how is this thing organized? What's really in here? And that can help you just kind of get on top of what all is in there. So the part one is by far the biggest part. It's over 500 pages. It includes some introduction stuff. It includes information about the environment in which projects are done. It includes some things about the role of the project manager, and there's reference to the idea that it's not just about technical skills, but you need leadership skills and strategic and business management skills. So they talk about the talent triangle, which they debuted a few years ago in terms of what's needed from an effective project manager. And then it goes into all the knowledge areas, the 10 knowledge areas, the inputs, tools, and all outputs, and all of the minutia and detail around that. So that's part one. Then part two is called the standard. And again, this isn't new. They've always had this. But the standard's got some concepts that they to take a look at. And then it's got the same 49 processes, but instead of being organized by knowledge area, they're organized by process group. So they have the processes, and they talk about what the process is all about. They talk about the benefits of the process and the inputs and outputs, but they don't have all the minutia around the tools. So this is helpful for a couple of reasons. One, it's hard to keep track of all the detail when you're reading these processes and inputs, tools, and outputs, and it's just, I mean, it's overwhelming. So this is pulls up a little higher level, but importantly, it's also the processes organized by process group, which is how the exam is organized. So the exam, again, the PMP exam is a test on application of these good practices. Well, the process groups are what we do on projects. The knowledge areas are just what we know. And the knowledge areas are pretty artificial constructs. If you think about it, they're kind of these siloed things, and it's helpful to read them and understand them independently, but that's not actually how you do stuff, right? It's not like I come in on Tuesday and do time management, or I come in on Thursdays and today's my quality management day. We're doing all of those things together. What we're doing is initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, and closing projects. So really, it helps you commune with the idea of these processes are what we're doing. That's why the exam is organized that way. So even if you don't start out with the part two, after you've studied for a while, it's a good idea to go through and read them and kind of think about just kind of getting yourself oriented to what's in there by process group. And then part three's got all sorts of appendices, which are, I think, helpful. So the appendix 1, X1, is the changes that they made in the 6th edition. So, you know, and some people are kind of, you know, interested in what's changed from they follow edition to edition. If 6th edition is your first exposure to the PMBOK, you maybe won't find this so helpful. You don't need to know what the changes are. You just need to know what's in 6th ed. But just be aware that they go through for each knowledge area all of the changes. So that may be handy depending on what you're looking for. Now, some of these appendices, though, I mentioned those sections that they have at the beginning of each knowledge area. And what they've done is they've kind of summarized them or pulled them all together. So, for example, adaptive considerations for adaptive environments. Tailoring considerations, key concepts. So Appendix 3 is implications of the type of environment for process groups, for what you're doing in the process groups. That's super helpful. That's something I would definitely take a look at and prep for my exam if I'm doing the PMP. Appendix 4 is all of those key concepts per knowledge area. So maybe I don't want to sit there and wade through 500 pages, flipping through the pages just to look at key concepts in scope management and time management and cost management. Well, there they are. They're all consolidated. Maybe I just want to think about, tailoring considerations. What are the things I have to think about? Here they are all collected. And then Appendix 6 is the tools and techniques, and this is new. It's a table of the tools and techniques, and what they've done here in 6th Ed is they've kind of reorganized the tools. It's not like there's this invention of all new tools, but they've put them into groups, and so there's definitions of the tools, and then where there is subsequent reference, they just mention it, which is typical. But sometimes it gets a little confusing as to, okay, where do I find the definition of that tool, or what's included in that collection of tools? So this table can be pretty handy to help you know where to go to look for the definition and where you see that it's being used, just because there are a lot of them, and the way they have it organized, it's not bad. It's just, this can be a helpful resource. So I would take a look at that tools and techniques table. All right. So here then, so that's about the PMBOK. The other standard here is the Guide to Business Analysis. So this is the kind of one of the big ta-das from last year. And so as I say, this is to business analysis what the PMBOK is to project management. The reason they didn't call it the project management body of knowledge is because somebody else has already published a or a business analysis body of knowledge. We already have a BABOK for the different organisms from IIBA. So we've got this now called the PMI Guide to Business Analysis. Yes, this is all very confusing. You have this, you have the practice guide, you've got, it's hard keeping these documents straight. I appreciate that, and I deal with this stuff every day. So, but here we have the Guide to Business Analysis. They've referred to it as the guidance standard. And so it's very, very similar to the PMBOK. You've got process groups, knowledge areas, inputs, tools, outputs. It's much easier to read. Nice, hefty, white pages. It's a much easier document to digest. So, but this is going to be a key resource for PBA exam prep after June 25th. This will definitely be something you want to avail yourself of. So you get free access to this as a member of PMI, and then you may want to purchase a copy. So, all right. And then I just, these are the most recent numbers that I've got. And I just like to track numbers because I don't know, I like to track numbers. So numbers of folks who have various certifications. So since it's been released, the PBA actually in terms of percentage is by far the fastest growing. PMI insists that ACP is the fastest growing, and when I asked why they say that when the numbers suggest otherwise, they told me they couldn't tell me. But so, in terms of maybe, even looking at raw numbers, that's not the case, because PMP in terms of raw numbers is the fastest growing. But so these are two very fast growing certifications, the ACP and the PBA. And honestly, I think the PBA is a great certification for anybody that's already got a PM. You are almost certainly doing business analysis in your work. I think there's a lot of hybrid PMBAs out there. And I just think it's a really super helpful certification. It helps you understand the delineation between those roles, and you are more effective at recognizing where you are doing business analysis and where you're doing project management and being better at them. If you've got a BA that you're working with, you're going to be way more effective working with them. So, I expect to see this number to go up. And the just first couple of months here, the PBA sustained pretty aggressive growth there. The ACP not so much, but like I say, I haven't gotten recent numbers, so I don't know what that looks like now a few months later, but just food for thought on that. So, pop quiz here. What is more fun than studying for a PMI exam? Anybody? Everything. Everything is more fun than studying for a PMI exam. So my suggestion is that if you're going to do this, you need to commit yourself to doing a little something at least a little something every day, even if it's just reading flashcards. That's 7 days a week. You need to do a little something, maybe just writing things down or reading the names of processes every 24-hour period. One little thing for each box on the calendar. So you just really have to stay on top of it. And I have found that to be the single most important thing. What happens is, both from personal experience and from students who come to class and then they get derailed, is that if you let 1 day go, then 2 days go, and 3 days go, it's really easy for it to slip away. So even if it's just 5 minutes of looking at flashcards, you just got to really stay at it and get it done. So that is my #1 recommendation. So PMI certification top prep tips. #10, get plenty of rest before your exam. Fatigue does not help you, so make sure you get rest before you go in the night before. Practice your brain dump. So you get an opportunity to do a brain dump. The brain dump is done within the time period of your exam. So your exam starts, and then you're able to purge onto paper or a whiteboard key things that you want to remember. And so, practice that. Give some thought to what you want those things to be. And we talk about these things in more detail in our certification classes and kind of give some guidance on that. #8, keep studying until you score at least in the 80% on practice tests. So you need to really be I tell my students well into the 80%, at least the mid-80s on practice tests. After you've read all of the resources, practice doing simulations on mixes of questions. So after you've kind of been through everything, go ahead and do practice tests on all of the topics. Use your flashcards or make flashcards as you go through your materials. So one of my favorite things to do when I study for certification is get some, like recipe cards, and just as you're studying, write stuff down, write a term down, and on the other side write a definition. Or if it's a model, draw a little picture, and on the other side write how and when you'd use that. And that's just a really great process. Study one chapter or one domain or one knowledge at a time, and then do drills on those areas. So you can, kind of take a chunk of time and just focus on one area at a time, and then do drills. Supplement if you're studying for your PBA with our study guide. Has been a really helpful resource to folks. Read the PMBOK guide or the practice guide and other key resources that we recommend at least once. So I know everybody has a different style, and I know people who have taken the PMP and passed without reading the PMBOK, for example. That's not my recommendation. I would never recommend that, and that's just not my style. My recommendation would be to read all of the key resources at least once. So you need to be familiar with those. Partly because, a lot of it has to do with the terminology. It's not that you haven't done this stuff, obviously. You have to have thousands of hours of experience, but it's just a different way of talking about this stuff and thinking about it, because we don't use those terms. And we don't have these sort of discrete artifacts. We have these artifacts, but they're not described in such detail in terms of inputs, tools, and outputs. So it really helps you understand what they're trying to get at. Plan to commit to at least 40 hours at a minimum to prepping for an exam, and that's after you've taken a boot camp. So our boot camps give you the 35 or 21 contact hours that you need in order to apply for the exam. So 40 hours is at a minimum after the boot camp. And you might not need that many for the ACP, but for the PBA and the PMP, I would say you do. And then do some kind of prep every day, in case you didn't get it just a few minutes ago. Every day, something. And then to share with you, and this is a special for today, may the 4th be with you. So my son shared that with me this morning. I thought I'd pass that on. That's good stuff. So that's what I got. So does anybody have any questions or clarifications, or what are you out there thinking about? Anybody have anything else I can share in more detail? Or I'm just curious, how many of you are thinking about PMP? If you can raise your hand. Okay. How about PBAs? Okay. How about ACPs? Any ACP? How many are just kind of thinking in general and just trying to figure out what to do? Just getting started, maybe. Okay. All right. Good. All right. Anybody else? Anybody questions at all? Okay. Well, you've got you'll be hearing from us then with the discount that you get for our resources. You can sure reach out to us and ask any questions, and I'll be glad to help you with any specific questions you might have about where you're at on your journey. And we just really love to partner with you and help you do what you'd like to do in the area of certification. I'm a huge advocate of certification. I think it's time well spent. And I know sometimes people, well, certification doesn't make you good at what you do. And that is a fact. Certification isn't going to make you good, but it is a great way to help you solidify your understanding around something, gives you confidence. It refines your practice. There's just, I've done a lot of it, and it has been a good experience for me every time. So I think it makes you more holistic in your understanding about what your discipline is all about. It makes you more effective. So good luck to all of you, and enjoy your weekend, or if you're already into your weekend, I hope it's going well. So take care, folks, and hope to hear from you.